Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with my good friends Mark Ostrander and Grant Turner. We are weighing in. We're made possible by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. This week feels like we've got a little bit of time to catch our breath. And there's a bunch of events this weekend, but most of them regional. So I think we're going to get to talk to about a couple different things that, frankly, I think are going to be a lot of fun. I wanted to start out with Minnesota high school girls. They're the 32nd state to add high school wrestling for girls. Obviously a great thing. Just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that to start things off.
Yeah, I think it's outstanding. And I would project in the next 3 or 4 years, David, we're going to be closer to 40 to 45 states having girls wrestling. It's taken off. It's a great opportunity for these young ladies to participate in another sport. And it's, my opinion, the greatest sport ever developed. So.
Yeah, huge win for the Midwest. Now that's, they got Augsburg up there. They've started to add collegiate women's wrestling, giving them an opportunity to, stay in state if they wanted to and wrestle there. So this is a huge win for the country.
Yeah, like Missouri had it, and it's interesting. I think Missouri has it, and Iowa has not approved girls wrestling yet, which is, frankly, mind-boggling. When you think about, and I'm not sure Oklahoma has girls wrestling yet either.
So they're waiting on having, I think it's like a total of 50 schools in the state of Iowa. I think that was the number that I had heard, that they're waiting to have 50 programs within the state. I think they're at 33 or something right now.
How does that work, chicken and the egg, though? If you have a program, you don't have a state tournament. How does that work?
They have
they actually had a state tournament, didn't they, Grant, this year?
They did. They've had it for 2 years now. They had one up at Waverly, and then they just hosted the unofficial state tournament at the that new arena, the Mediacom Excel Arena or Extreme Arena, this past year. So they're basically holding it just out of the the NWCA Division III national tournament, which was basically like an open.
Yeah.
Very similar. So,
yeah, I mean, you're right. Andy Hamilton's girlfriend's daughter wrestled in that, and he did a big piece about it. And he actually talked to me a lot about how nervous it was to coach. And I'm like, welcome to the club, kid. Now trying to do that for 30 some odd people a year for 20 something years, and then you'll be fully indoctrinated into things.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Grandview just picked up a pretty high ranking recruit for their women's program this week also, David.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Who you talking about, Allie Reagan?
Yep.
Yeah, we mentioned that last week. I told GT to stop doing things that we have to talk about on the podcast. Ben Provisor, Allie Reagan. I think they're going to find an extra semester of eligibility for Mark Ostrander, and it'll just be a wrap.
Oh, that would be a nightmare just waiting to happen.
You stall on your feet and pick top. You'll be fine. That's what all old guys do.
I would love to be your coach, Mark. I would love it.
I wouldn't make it through one day of practice with you, Grant. Not one. I'd have trouble just getting my shoes on. I'd have to take a water break and probably a nap. So I nap a lot now. All times of the day. You'd be amazed.
And flexibility is probably not ideal at this point of life either. Yeah. So USA Wrestling ran the Western Regional, the Northeast Regional, and the Northern Plains this last weekend. The regionals are a really good chance to see the kids that are probably on the short list to place at Fargo. So, that was good. I was actually with Jason Keck this weekend, who coaches at Greater Heights. His son was third in freestyle, second in Greco, had a good tournament. And then a kid that I helped work with, who's going to go to the Olympic Training Center EAP program, Vinny Zurban, went 1-1 at the Northern Plains. GT, I'm guessing that these regionals, when coaches like you get a chance to get to them, are a really good chance to recruit kids and even see kids early, especially in those cadet divisions, right?
I mean, it's always great. I mean, once again, it gives you a regional basis for competition, because Fargo, sometimes you just run into a buzzsaw, you have a bad match, and you don't necessarily know who's all good. And then also just, it gives you a point of reference if you're recruiting, let's say, for instance, Iowa kids. I kind of know how good a specific kid from Iowa is. So then if this dude from Wisconsin goes and smashes him, like, oh, that guy's pretty legit. So there's always like a great reference to localized talent. And once again, with it being regional, some of the kids can afford to, travel. Maybe they can't really travel to Fargo, or if they can't travel to whatever the U.S. Open, UW Juniors usually in Vegas, maybe it's a little closer to home for some of these kids. So it's always cool to see.
Yep. And it's like you said, it's a chance to get on the radar. Like maybe Grant Turner's the number 3 guy in the country, and David Mirikitani loses to him 9-8. And people are like, maybe that guy's pretty good, maybe I'm small town from another state and just, family doesn't have money to go to all these events. So I think the other thing too, is just good to see us getting back to normal. Like here in Missouri, the mask mandate has been relaxed to fit the CDC guidelines. So I think, wrestling and all these other sports have a big chance to, to be sort of the leaders and going back to, having people do things and being active. And obviously mental health goes along with physical health. And so when people are, able to be out, like, GT, I hadn't seen you in months when I saw you in Omaha back in the fall. And it was just good just to hang out, like,
It's good to be seen. It's good to be seen by people.
Yeah. Well, when you look like you, it's good to be seen for sure. So,
it's awesome.
Another event, which is not really directly wrestling related, was the IBJJF held their Pan Ams this weekend, the no-gi tournament. And Mark Botindri, who wrestled for us at Merrimack, won gold medal. Michael Pixley, who I work with and who also wrestled for Grandview, was a gold medalist. And Pedigo Submission Fighting won their first team title. If you guys like jiu-jitsu, if you like wrestling and see guys want to train hard, go on Flow and watch this Daisy Fresh documentary. That's where these guys train. They train in Mount Vernon, which is where I coached at for a year at Ren Lake, like right in the same town. These dudes are savages. They live, breathe, eat, drink jiu-jitsu. So congratulations to Heath and all that crew. So I think the big news continues to be the portal. We had reported that we heard that Max Dean was leaning towards Penn State, and he did. So let's start with that. The rumor is he'll go 97. Beard was at 97 this year. Obviously, everyone's back. Probably the only guy leaving that weight class that's good is Amin. He would go back down to 84, but CJ Brucky comes back in. Darmstead comes back in. Those are just the guys off the top of my head. Obviously, the Ferraris, the Elams, all these other guys are back. Eric Schultz, who didn't place but was like the 2 seed, is back. Whoever wants to go first, where do you see Max Dean in terms of the pecking order at 197?
Well, I guess I would see him right around where Warner's at, and I think Warner will be number 2 starting the year out, just because, if he comes back, he'll probably go 84. So I just, Bonacorsi's back at number 2, I guess. So I guess maybe Warner's 3. So maybe you put Max Dean in there at 3. He is going up a weight. Beard was an All-American last year. I'm kind of surprised that Max it's something that Penn State's, going to do, because usually a returning All-American at a tough weight, you're pretty excited to have another 3 years or 4 years with him because he's young. Give him that experience. Max has 2 years coming back. So, and I heard the reason, David, that one of the reasons that he left is because of the way that the Ivy League schools are working with the COVID testing, mandatory that you get your shots. He didn't think that was right. And his brother didn't think it was right to be forced to get a shot, and kind of what they had to do. Now he's going to go to Penn State, and the Big Ten is requiring students, from what I hear, to also get a shot to go to school. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but it's kind of what I know so far.
GT.
Yeah, Penn State got a heck of a recruit with Max Dean. I think he's a guy that can, once again bring some new looks from a Cornell perspective into the Penn State room, which all those guys eat and breathe and sleep wrestling up there. So all those guys are going to get better with having him around. It is probably, let's say, unfortunate for Beard that, a returning finalist is coming into their room and potentially projected at his weight class. But, those guys don't shy away from competition. Those guys are all going to get better because of it. But there's only so many spots. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out and who moves around and what happens. And, they're definitely, getting an athlete that can help them score some points at the national tournament and Big Tens. But yeah, to Mark's point, like, you kind of, where do you kind of put him in there? He's going up a weight class. He's not too terribly tall.
Right.
He's not necessarily like a bona fide 197. And plus, that weight class, has some young talent. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes up the Big Ten, because like with Schultz, who was, one of the best guys in the Big Ten last year, just had a bad tournament. And then Amin dropping down weight classes, Warner coming back. It'll be very interesting. Plus, you're going to have a whole new fresh crop of recruiting people coming in. Braxton Amos will be available for Wisconsin. So talking college wrestling with an extra year of eligibility is wild. Like, yeah, you all think about like if like an Olympic red shirt, maybe a gray shirt, now like a COVID red shirt. Like, where was this stuff at? Like, I don't know, back in the heyday. Like, give me an extra year of college and let me train for another year, and I could be definitely way better.
For sure. So I'm looking at the brackets. Ferrari was first. Bonacorsi was second. Amin, who we talked about, will drop down. But Amin will be replaced by C.J. Brucky, who transferred in from Princeton, who is and was really good. Warner was fourth. We mentioned him. Rocky Elam was fifth. Woodley was sixth. Beard was seventh. So you sort of would take him out of the ranking. So Amin and Beard would come out. He was eighth. But Cam Caffey was round of 12. Panola was round of 12. Sloan was round of 12. Norfleet was round of 12. And Schultz was round of 16. And Elam was round of Adam was round of 24. And then you had Darmstead in, and you had Brucky, and you had Braxton Amos, like you said, GT. Like, I was telling Mark this just off the air, like I think like Michael McGee from Arizona State took seventh this year. Like, he could be ranked 12th in the preseason and that not be wrong. Like, this would be the craziest year ever of doing rankings, like the preseason ones, because you can stack them a lot of different ways. Like, you can argue Gabe Dean is third, right? Because he's a finalist, and none of these other guys have been a finalist. Or you can say, well, but he was at 84 and he's not that big, and so we're going to rank him 8th behind all the other guys who are all Americans. Or you can, split the baby and pick some spot in between. It'll be interesting. At least this year, hopefully they'll have a full schedule and these guys will hit each other and be able to sort it out. But it's, I'm going to circle back to Penn State, but Evan Wick is in the portal. Jacason Burks is in the portal, and Jared Kradiger moved from Wisconsin to Minnesota. Let's talk about Jacason Burks first. He's a Omaha kid. Zach Dominguez, Dane Peterson Wrestling Club, I think, right, Grant? He's one of those guys.
Yep.
Super talented guy in freestyle and Greco. 25-pounder, probably a lifer at 25 or really close to it. Wrestled 41 in the duel to help them out and actually hung in there pretty good with Demas till the end. But he's behind Mastro, obviously trying to figure out another place to go. I know GT, I know you're really good friends with Zach and Dane. Jason Burks is a guy that could be an impact guy in the right program, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an impact guy for whoever gets him. And, he's a true legit talent. I think he's just, had a bit of a, with this extra year with Dayton and, Mastro being there, he's not a 41 pounder, so he's not going to find a home at 41. He's going to find a home at 25, 33, wherever he ends up going. But yeah, he's a guy that should, and
I think he's froze up for a second. We'll come back.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, we got you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So basically I think he's going to be a great pickup. He's not proven himself at the collegiate level yet, but he's got a lot of the tools.
And before I get to you, Mark, he's a kid that, like, if he came out this year, would be a huge recruit. So, sometimes the shine comes off you a little bit after a year, but it just depends. Like, somebody's going to look at him and go, there's nothing, nothing right or wrong with him different from coming out of high school. Did you get a chance to see him wrestle at all in high school, Mark?
No, I didn't. I just knew he was one of the top ranked kids in his weight coming out. And I'm sure he's going to land somewhere where they're going to need help with the lower weights. So I think he'll be fine. I think he just kind of saw the writing on the wall at Oklahoma State. Didn't feel like it was maybe the perfect fit for him. Again, a lot of these kids didn't get to do a lot of visiting with COVID, and they just kind of walk on campus. And they had talked about this now for a little over a year, that, without really knowing what they were getting into, they get there, find out it's not really what they wanted, and so they're going to leave. So I think he'll be fine. I think he's very talented. So somebody's going to really pick up a good kid.
Yeah. Yep. And, especially if he goes to a program where he's the guy, that's a lot of it too, is if you can go to a spot where you're the guy and not a guy, and people pour a little bit more time and resources into you, like when Joey Prada ended up at OU, they needed a 25-pounder. And I talked to Rossella, and he's like, because we knew we were losing 25 almost every time. He goes, that's hard starting out a duel when there's only 10 weights. He goes, we got a guy now that can win a lot of matches. And, I was talking to somebody this last week, and the formula for, getting good is first you get good at winning duels, then you get good at winning tournaments. So, he's the right fit, he can help somebody. Let's talk about Evan Wick. So to me, that's really interesting. He's multiple time All-American in Wisconsin. He takes the Olympic redshirt year. And it almost feels like what happened with Jay Nyerman, where he took an Olympic redshirt year and then didn't stay at Missouri. I think there's a couple ways to look at this. First of all, if you're Wisconsin, you're like, man, we probably just should have wrestled him, and had him wrestle for us. The rumor is he's going to go to Cal Poly because his brother just signed there. The one thing we don't talk about the portal is money. Like these schools, some of them don't have money, because they're booked. And a lot of these schools are actually overbooked. Like an obvious example is Iowa, because they have so much talent, so much of that talent is coming back for an extra year. Now, just so people reminder, the NCAA has given these schools a 1-year waiver that says you can go over 9.9, but you have to assign those extra dollars to those athletes. Like if Mark Ostrander was on an 80% scholarship, now you can be at 10.7, but you can't cut him some to go get another guy. He's got to be on that same 0.8. Now, just because the NCAA says you can do that doesn't mean the university is going to say you can have these extra scholarships. I mean, that's obviously an economic decision. The Iowas of the world are obviously going to do that, clearly, because all these guys are coming back. Wick's a pinner, too. And that's the other thing. Like, he's a guy that, even if he takes fifth, might score as much as a third or a second place guy that scores a bunch of decisions. I've heard from several coaches that the leader in the clubhouse is Polly, which would obviously be a huge get for Cerritos and Chianuma and those guys and his brothers out there. It's always fun to speculate. Where do you think he's a good fit, guys? Mark, you can go first on this one.
Penn State. I've heard it's down to Penn State, Cal Poly. They need help at 65. I think Joe Lee could probably go down to 57, David. I may be wrong. He may be too big for 57, but I think that's kind of what Cal's might be going around in his mind, thinking if we could get Joe down to 57, bring in Wick at 65, look at our lineup. We can compete for a national title. They're going to compete anyway. I mean, obviously, adding Max Dean, another possible finalist. You get Evan Wick in there, and I'm not saying Evan's going to be a finalist, David. He's had troubles with Marinelli. Marinelli's had trouble with about everybody else when it comes to the national tournament. But during the year, in a duel, and we're going to maybe break that down a little bit later, if, what could happen if certain guys are aware. But anyway, I would think he'd probably want to wrestle with his brother out at Cal Poly. But I know Penn State wants him, and it's one of his two choices.
And might be more. GT, who else are you hearing or thinking, or what makes sense? Any of that sort of thing?
I mean, there's got to be a sleeper one in there that we're just not thinking about. But like the Penn State and the Cal Poly situations make sense to me. I don't know what he is looking for. If he's looking for a potential place to maybe go to grad school, is he looking to a place to train after the collegiate season? Some of these things might be a factor for him as like an RTC venture. Any of that stuff could be a factor, and it's like, well, then where does he see that envisioning? Because he has had some success at the international styles. His brother and family are all from California. Does he want to go back home? Does he want to pursue maybe something outside of the sport of wrestling? And maybe the connections out in California are really great for him. Who knows? But as far as the wrestling component, he's super talented, super good, proven talent. And of course, he's got a nasty cradle and he knows how to score some bonus points. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see who gets him. And it'll be a really cool discussion once he lands somewhere to discuss, one, their national tournament points, and then also how it plays into either the Big Ten tournament, the Big 12 tournament, the Pac-12 tournament. So should be pretty fun.
I'm gonna throw out 2 wild cards and maybe paint a picture on how this could be interesting. One is Oklahoma State. I saw Travis Whitlake at Coralville, and he is thick. And they said he's gotten big quickly. And I know that in an ideal world, Oklahoma State would like to redshirt Plott, let him get healthy from that shoulder that he had, kept popping in and out. So, that would give them a year, and also, unbelievable training partner. The other thing is we're assuming Wick is 65 because he's been 65, but he's certainly tall enough that he could get to 74. The other one, which is just interesting to me, just popped into my head, would be Missouri, because I thought O'Toole could make 57. He's the babyface assassin, but he's not super cut up. He's from Wisconsin, so that I'm guessing they probably know each other, at least someone. I know Wick's not a Wisconsin native, but can you imagine if they dropped him in, if they pulled O'Toole down to 57, how good Missouri would be? I know Mark's super high on Missouri, And the other thing is, if he goes to a Cal Poly, that's a cool thing too, because now they're probably going to have another All-American. They had a great year this year with, having an All-American, being in the top 25. Got a chance to talk to Chianuma about that. So, but you said it right, GT. Wherever he goes, it's fun to speculate on the front end, and then Mark and I are those kind of dorks that like to do all the math on the back end and figure out how it's going to go. So. Speaking of doing some dork stuff, it's way, way early, but let's look at Iowa and Penn State in a duel, and then look at them in a tournament. We'll do the duel first. We'll take turns rotating. I'll name the weight. I'll name the matchup, and then name what I think is the team score. And then if you guys want to do something different, then we'll put it down and we'll add them all up. So I'll go first. 25, Spencer Lee, Robbie Howard, or Gary Steen. I'd have Spencer Lee by tech fall, so 5-0. And you guys are across my screen. Mark, what do you got, 5 or 6? Or you got Robbie Howard pinning him? What do you got there?
No. Yes, but not Robbie Howard. I'll go Spencer with the fall.
Okay.
25.
GT?
I will take Spencer by fall.
Okay. All right. Mark, you're next. RBY against DeSanto.
RBY by a decision.
GT?
I'll take RBY by decision.
Yep. I think we're good there. This next one's interesting. Let's say, well, we have to pick this. Do we want to say Nick Lee's at 41, or do we want to say Nick Lee's at 49?
Nick Lee's at 49.
Okay, so Bo Bassett is against Jaden Ironman, and GT, you're first.
Jaden Ironman by major decision.
Okay. I'll say Jaden by fall. Mark?
I'm going to say Jaden by major.
Okay. So now 49. Now it's Nick Lee against
Max Murin.
Max Murin. So I'm going to say Nick Lee by major. Mark,
Nick Lee by decision.
GT.
I'll say Nick Lee by major decision.
Okay. 57 is Caleb Young and
Let's go with Joe.
Joe Lee.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Caleb Young by a decision.
GT.
Caleb Young by decision.
Yep, I agree. So we have differences on points right now, but everybody's picked the same across the board on who's going to win. Okay, so 65. Now this is where it gets interesting because Shane Griffith is still out there in the ether. Evan Wick is out there in the ether. Okay. As of right now, I would just say this: if they don't get one of those guys, Marinelli's favored, right? You know, over what Penn State has in the clubhouse right now. Would we agree on that?
Yep.
So I know Mark's going to want to put who's wearing the Penn State singlet at 165. Mark, I'm going to let you. Who's in there?
I'm gonna say Wick's there.
Okay, that may not change anything. GT, who you got?
Regardless of whoever Penn State gets or puts out, I'm taking Marinelli by decision.
Okay.
Doesn't matter
Correct.
who Penn State has.
Okay, I can't disagree with that, Mark.
I agree. Same.
Okay. Now, this is the one that's interesting. 74, Strachey and Kemmerer. Okay, I'm going to just chicken out and take the last decision. I'll take Strachey by decision.
I'll take Kemmerer by decision.
Shocking. Okay. GT, break the top.
I'm going to take Strachey by a decision.
All right. 84. So we're going to say Brooks is at 84, right?
Yep.
Against Nelson Brands.
Yep.
Okay, Mark, that's your first.
I'm gonna say Brooks by a major.
Okay.
I'll say Brooks by a major, but another wrinkle is Assad. I haven't heard much out of him for a little while, but the guy is super talented. He could be a guy there too. I love Nelson to death. And like he national qualifier won, I think one or two matches at nationals this past year.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just to throw another little part into the conversation, there might be some depth and there might be some bumping around there. So
Yeah, and I had heard he just didn't come in this year like in the shape they wanted him in, and so they went with Nelson Brands. But that's definitely a legit thing. Okay, so now 97. This is a match I feel like these two matches feel like we pick something different. So GT, you're first. It's Warner against Max Dean.
Warner versus Max Dean, I'm taking Jacob Warner.
Okay.
If it's Beard, I'm going to take Warner as well, but by a decision for both.
Okay.
Not that, yeah, either way, I think Warner gets a decision.
I'm going to take Max Dean by decision. Grant, I assume you're taking, or Mark, I assume you're taking Warner.
I don't know. Where's the duel at, David? Give me a spot. In Iowa City.
St. Louis, Missouri.
Neutral
Neutral site.
Site.
Oh, I got to take Jacob Warner at a neutral site or at Iowa. If it's at Penn State, I've got to take Max Dean.
Wow, way to cover all your bases.
There you go. Hey, somebody's going to get Carver. So
okay, yeah.
Max Dean, that would be a perfect place to get Carver for Max Dean because it happens in every time Iowa wrestles a Penn State team. Somebody loses that's not supposed to lose.
That's fair.
I would say Max is favored, but if it's at Iowa, I think Warner can take him out.
Okay. Heavyweight is Kirkfleet and Cassiope. I'm going first. I don't know why. I feel like I'm going to take Kirkfleet. It's probably a dumb choice. He's lost to him twice. I just feel like with a healthy year, I don't know, probably a dumb choice. Mark, I know you're going Cassiope.
I'm pretty sure he's only lost to him once, and that was in the wrestlebacks to the Big Ten. I don't think they wrestled at D1s this year.
Okay.
So I think he lost to him once. He got beat down. Oh yeah, he beat him down. In the duel, I do not see him beating Cassiope. Possibly at nationals. It gives him a little bit more time. He needs to wrestle him probably another turn before he gets there. I think it's going to be much closer, but I got to go with Cassiope.
Okay. GT.
What's the dual score? I know we're neutral site.
Oh,
Which
Iowa's
way the
already,
wind is the blowing?
Well, okay.
Iowa's already won 6 matches.
Well,
Yeah.
not necessarily.
So, I mean, Cassiope has done really well against him, and I think Cassiope is also like very mature in his wrestling. He knows what he can do, and he goes out and he can go get a decision basically about it on anyone besides basically Gable.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take Cassiope there, but the one thing that is, I think, the biggest like question mark is like, who else can Penn State put out there in any of the weights? I mean, because there's, like Bo Bartlett's, like if I'm going back to I've already picked my pick, so now I'm going to throw wrinkles at you for the rest of the time. Is that like the projections of guys in that middle there? Penn State is loaded in the middle, and we're based off of kind of what we've seen out of both of them in a COVID year. Because Robbie Howard's got another year of getting better over the spring and summertime, so maybe
Well, Shane Van Ness comes in too. Penn State's done a great job with impact freshmen, but here's sort of the consensus. So I'm just going to go on the average. So we got Iowa's up 6-0 after 25. Then it's 6-3. Then it's going to be 10-3. Then it's going to be 10-7. Then it's going to be 13-7. Then it's 16-7. Two out of 3 of us picked Penn State at 74, so we're going to go with that. 16-10. Then 16-14. And then you got Iowa winning 97 and heavy. So that makes it 22-14. Obviously, if one of those matches flip, then it would be 19-17. And then Iowa's basically winning on bonus. I mean, basically it comes down to Spencer Lee, which Mark and I had this conversation, a very cursory conversation about this like a month ago. I'm like, I'll bet you it's 5-5 and they win on Spencer. And it feels like even, some you guys, I think, picked it 6-4, but I think it went 5-5. It wouldn't shock you. I mean, if Nick Lee goes 41, maybe they put Van Ness in at 49, maybe they win both those weights. They probably need to win the duel. The interesting thing is this: Iowa looks like they're favored to win the duel, but completely different tournament when you think about it, right? Like Penn State's got 3 champions coming back, and the gap between first and second is significant, or first and third. I mean, obviously it feels, I know Carter Sirachi can and should be ranked number 1, but Kemmer feels like they're like 1A, 1B. Jaden and Nick Lee feel like they're 1A, 1B. Next year, to me, feels like having a big lock, like a guy that's going to win. Like, I think Spencer Lee's the most valuable guy in the tournament next year, because unless Gable Stevenson comes back, but Minnesota doesn't have all the rest of the guys to go with them. But he's the only guy, like, you go Spencer Lee next topic. All these other weights are, if Dayton Fix beat RBY, wouldn't be shocking. If Yanni's in the mix and beats Nick Lee or Sammy Sasso or Austin O'Connor, like, all these weights feel like they're all up in the air except 25. At least that's how I see it. I don't know what you guys think.
I guess my question is, where are some of these guys going to go, David? Why wouldn't Seabass go back to 33? He's already beaten Penn State, returning national champ, RBY. He beat him the year before twice. So he's already beaten the national champion. Why wouldn't he go back? Especially if Yanni comes back at 141. It just makes his tournament that much harder. And I'm sure he wants to be a national champion before he steps out of college. His best shot at being a national champion would be 133. So if that happens, then all of a sudden you got a national tournament where, say, Seabass runs the table and beats everybody in the Big Tens. He'd be the number 1 seed. RBY would be 2. Dayton would be 3. And then you got DeSanto at 4.
GT, Mark's seeding the tournament.
I'm seeding the tournament for you.
Seeding it in May.
I mean, there's so many things that could happen. If Yanni goes 41, I think Nick Lee or one of them's going to go up to 49. Whether it's Nick Lee or whether it's Ironman, one of them's probably going to go to 49 because either one of those guys could win 149, David. I truly believe they're that good.
Yeah, but Sammy Sasso and Austin O'Connor, like, that's the crazy thing, though.
They're good wrestlers, but they're not at the level of Nick Lee and Ironman.
You and I talked about it this year. We thought if Nick Lee went 49, that Penn State would be better because we thought Bartlett could place at 41.
Yes.
GT, do you want to seed 197 right now? You just want to put that out there and get it done early for us.
You guys heard it here first. The national tournament has been seeded.
It's over. Yeah.
It's over.
It's like Terry Brand said on the podcast. He's like,
Who won?
those rankings are for you guys. He goes, the rest of us just go wrestle the meat. So he's not right or wrong, but there's some accuracy in there. So, and we're not counting like an Oklahoma State. We're not counting a Cornell. We're not counting a Michigan, Arizona State, Missouri. Like there's a lot of schools. I mean, here's I think the fallacy that's going to happen this year. Like when you do rankings, you go, oh, so-and-so took 6th last year. He's probably normally 9 times out of 10, you go, he's going to move up, right? Like he'll probably be in the top 4. And whether it's junior college or NEI or, you just think that, right? And that's, well, because he's back and some other guys aren't back. So he's probably, and he'll get a year better. Well, the opposite is true this year. Everybody's back and new dudes, like the Ivy League guys, like some of these other guys, like the CJ Bruckies of the world. And then it's obviously like the Braxton Amoses. There's maybe not a million freshmen that are going to come in and be hugely impactful, but there's enough that you go, man, like, again, when some of these rankings come out, there's going to be guys that placed last year, they're going to be ranked outside of the top 8. If you just take 125 as an example, like you add Vito Arujau and Patrick Glory in, the 8th guy is now 10th. Because those guys are both going to get ranked above the 8th place guy and deservedly so. I don't know where they go in, but they go in. They don't go in at 9. I can tell you that.
No. 2 and 3.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You've got the whole tournament seeded already, so we're good.
I know.
But for the rest of us, then
I can do it right now, David. We don't have to wait. And, you can start your fantasy grade picks and I'll just get a rank for us. This isn't rocket science. We know who the really good kids are. We know who's going to be there. Unless we have injuries. I can't help it if somebody gets hurt.
GT, this is my cross that I bear on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Well, that's you get a view of some of these guys over the spring and summer times, but we haven't seen the Ivy League in how long?
Yeah.
At a national tournament, 2019.
Yeah.
So, we got a pretty good idea, but there's always wrinkles. The guy was it Truax from Cal Poly?
Yeah.
Great tournament. Schultz goes down.
Yeah.
It's the national tournament, baby. Like that's
yeah.
And it happens all the time. There's guys that go down, but like when you think about their careers and how good those guys are, you think of them as almost unflappable. You think of like a Yanni who was just at the top of his game collegiately. Then you throw a whole bunch of new dudes at him. And it's like, Nick Lee's gotten way better. So there's so many things that are like intriguing about this upcoming collegiate season. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Yanni's a perfect example, and we're almost out of time. But that's a perfect example of a guy you're like, he was probably one of my biggest locks, like going into next year. And then Nick Lee beats him in freestyle, and he didn't like get a takedown and lace him. Like he beat him in wrestling positions. And I'm not saying he's better now, but I don't think you just automatically go, Yanni's going to beat Nick Lee, like where before you probably thought, at least I thought that. I shouldn't put anybody else's thoughts out there. So, Mark, we're still going to get to the best recruiting stories. It might take another week or two. I want to thank Grant and USA Wrestling. It's Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. And Grant just helped me get a podcast with Tadaki Hata. Those of you that don't know who Hata is, absolute legend in the sport. Couldn't have been a nicer guy. Just interviewed him literally like an hour and a half ago. It'll come out on Friday. The Oklahoma University podcast is out now. And it was, as somebody who's half Japanese, Hata was one of my dad's heroes growing up, and my dad doesn't have too many heroes. So Grant, sincerely, from the bottom, we tease each other a lot, but from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate that. It was awesome.
And just so the listeners understand, next week, Grant and myself will be hosting Matt Chat. David has the week off. He will not be doing it. And we have a special guest. And this guest has been inducted, if I'm not mistaken, and I may be off by one, and I've never heard of this before, Grant. Have you ever heard of a guy that's been inducted into 21 Hall of Fames, maybe 22, but 21 Hall of Fames in his lifetime? Ever?
I mean, I highly doubt that I could put up anybody against that.
Yeah. So we're going to have that person. I'm not going to say who it is. And then we will have someone else also. I'm going to interview one. Grant's going to interview the other. So it should be interesting. It may be the last time you ever see me on this podcast if I don't do a good job. So Grant, you're safe, obviously. But I may mess this up, but I don't think I will because I know this person fairly well. But I mean, it just boggles my mind that anybody could be in 21 Hall of Fames, and all related to wrestling. Not 21 from all different sports, or this is wrestling. This is amazing what this guy has done. So I'm really looking forward to it. But I'm not going to tell you who it is yet.
It'll be episode 100, which is a benchmark for Matt Chat, and I think weighing in, we're creeping up on episode 200, which is awesome to to think about those things and where it's come from. And so we want to thank USA Wrestling for having us on. This is probably my favorite 45 minutes of the week, talking about wrestling with you guys. And we appreciate everybody watching, listening, tweeting, resharing, all that stuff. Thank you guys so much, and we'll speak to you all next week.